Israel's fall did not begin on October 7th. Israel relentlessly and remorselessly baked it into the cake. This book provides a comprehensive historical analysis of the four structural forces that account for the cumulative disasters in Israel and the Middle East. First, the waves of Palestinian expulsion since the late 1940s. Second, the aggressive expansion of the Jewish settlements in the occupied territories. Furthermore, the recent rise of the Messianic far right has fostered the militarization of the settlers, accelerating the anti-Arab pogroms in the West Bank, which is effectively being annexed into Israel. Third, a half-century of failed American diplomacy in the Middle East. The fall of Israel shows how the U.S.-Israeli ties have moved from hedging and choosing sides to partnership and eventually a symbiosis. These are not ties that bind, but ties that blind. They account for 50 years of military destabilization in the region and U.S. complicity to genocidal atrocities. And finally, instead of fostering peace in the region, America's massive military aid to Israel, $18 billion in the past year alone, has amplified Israel's parallel militarization, degrading its economy, politics, and military. These forces feed on each other, forming a vicious cycle, thereby intensifying and broadening regional escalation. This 500-page account is packed with 73 photos, maps, and tables, providing a detailed and often surprising account of little-known events, past and present. Secular Jewish democracy is threatened by ultra-religious, autocratic forces, as evidenced by the record large mass protests against the judicial reforms since early 2023. Social divides are worse than ever before. Labor Zionism, with its more moderate, egalitarian legacies, has been crushed by revisionist Zionism, with its harsh right neoconservatism and iron wall security policies. Netanyahu's father, a lifelong revisionist and one-time assistant of Jabotinsky's secretary, befriended revisionists who sought to create a Jewish fascist state in Palestine. Netanyahu himself has always advocated the iron wall security policies. The Messianic far right has evolved hand-in-hand with the huge settler expansion since the 1970s, but its rise has drastically intensified in the past 25 years since the demise of the peace process. With the inclusion of the far right in the Netanyahu cabinet, the foxes entered the henhouse. Hence, the efforts to turn the secular democracy into a Jewish autocracy, to demolish Gaza, to annex the West Bank and devastate southern Lebanon, and to go after Iran. Past growth has benefited a small economic elite, plus the highly subsidized settlers. Income polarization is the highest among all OECD countries. Poverty is climbing, the welfare state is eroding, the economy relies on the expertise of the relatively narrow high-tech sector and the tax revenues of a shrinking middle class that's overburdened. Businesses are closing, tourism is kaput, Israel's credit rating has eroded, and as the high-tech brain drain has soared, Israel's future is at risk. Israeli independence and Palestinian Nakba or catastrophe are different sides of the same coin. Steinbach describes in detail the early Palestinian dual economy, the emergence of al-Banna's Islamic modernization and Qutb's Islamism already in the 1950s, the rise of Fatah and the PLO in the 1960s, and Hamas in the 1980s. The First Intifada, 1987 to 93, paused with the peace process. The Second Intifada, 2005, began with the demise of that process. It paused with Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, but was reignited following a democratic election in which the majority of the Palestinians voted for Hamas. Thereafter, Israel's blockade of Gaza, in cooperation with the US and the EU, effectively paved the way to an economic and geopolitical catastrophe. October 7, 2023, is a logical outcome of these brutal, misguided policies. This is one of the painful sections of the book. There is a huge gap between the West's media portrayal and what has taken place in Gaza. It is moral catastrophe that will cast a dark shadow over decades to come. These atrocities could not have happened without the incessant flow of U.S. arms and financing and the close collaboration of Israel and the Biden administration. Abundant evidence highlights U.S. complicity, as the leading genocide scholar William Shabbos has argued. The International Criminal Court, ICC, and the International Court of Justice, ICJ, accuse Israel of committing acts of genocide in Gaza. The Genocide Convention lists 5 conditions for genocide. On the basis of extensive evidence, Steinbach concludes that the Gaza atrocities fulfill 4, possibly all 5 conditions. This is a direct outcome of a status quo in which international law has been rendered effectively impotent. Dr. Dan Steinbach is an internationally renowned expert on the multipolar world economy and the founder of the global consultancy Difference Group Limited. He has served in the India-China-America Institute, US, the Shanghai Institutes for International Studies, China, and the EU Center, Singapore, and lectured and cooperated with several other think tanks around the world. He has consulted for multinational companies, multilateral development banks, government agencies, intergovernmental organizations like the OECD, and regional trading blocs such as the EU and several megacities. He has given keynotes on the global economy in institutional venues following Nouriel Roubini, Paul Krugman, Alan Greenspan, and Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and been interviewed by and contributed to most major media worldwide. Dr. Steinbach worked in the kibbutzim in his early life and has been influenced by progressive and peace movements.